Hey team, Alex here. Good to see you all. Okay, today I wanted to talk about stiffness and compressiveness, which you probably saw from the title of the video. Now I know I kind of covered this in my common misconceptions of stretching video. However, again, I reckon that one I'm probably trying to cover too broad a subject in just one video. And I think it's probably a bit much for one video. So we're going to do this again, a bit like my nutrition one, as a bit of a series. Now, I don't think this will be quite as long as a video as the nutrition one was. But we're just going to start with what are stiffness and compressiveness and what they mean. And then we're going to build in greater to, misconceptions of stretching, when to use it, how to use those things that apply to this kind of concept of stiffness and compressiveness. So today we're going to learn the concept of stiffness versus compressiveness and why you should know about it. Because again, I'm all about building knowledge so that you can make your own calls. Because if you know how these things work, then when you hear something or when you see a program, you either understand what the program is trying to achieve, or you can look at it and be like, hey coach, that seems wrong. Like, you've taught me all this and then this seems wrong, and more than likely will have a reason for it. But that's the point. You'll be able to question things. You won't just be following it on yourself, and it'll actually mean that you'll be able to do more things yourself as well. So let's learn some things. So first of all, I'm going to define stiffness and compressiveness. So stiffness in a short term basically is your ability to absorb and then redirect force. But what that means is your tendons and your ligaments, if you're very stiff, are what are absorbing the force, and then they are able to do like a really stiff spring. You hit the ground. A good example, easy way to explain it, a good example is as a sprinter. When the sprinter hits the ground, their tendons and ligaments in their foot, their calf, their lower leg, their upper leg, absorb that energy, store it in this spring, and then when they push off for their next stride, bang, release it and help them flow, keep running and not lose energy as they hit the ground. So they're very efficient. If you're stiff, you're very efficient at maintaining your velocity, maintaining your momentum, right? And continuing through that. So that's really important for someone like a sprinter who needs to run very quickly in a straight line, and also someone in a field sport actually, when you need to do a lot of change of direction, need a lot of agility, because that means it can absorb and then redirect that energy to take off quickly in, like I say, a perpendicular direction, right? So that's what stiffness is. Your efficiency of energy use and redirection in your muscles and tendons and ligaments. Compressiveness is on the other side of the spectrum, right? It's the opposite. Compressiveness is the ability for your muscles. So this one, opposed to going through tendons and ligaments as much, is more into your muscles. If you're more compressive, is the ability for your muscles to absorb the force from a stop, for example, and dissipate it. So if I'm running really hard and then I stop, like a netball player, probably the best example I can think of is a netball player running really hard. The ball comes, grabs it, bang, they stop. They just stop dead, right? They sink, their hips sink low, and their muscles take all that force and dissipate it, and bang, they're stopped, right? Just like that. That's the best example I can give you of what compressiveness does. So compressive is the ability for your muscles to absorb and dissipate that force. Okay. So now that we understand what each of those are, why would I want to be stiff and why would I want to be compressive? Now, you can kind of tell that from those examples I've given you there, but stiffness, again, lets you be efficient in maintaining your momentum, or maintaining your velocity, I should say, or your ability to quickly change direction or change the direction your velocity, your momentum is going without slowing down very much. The stiffer you are, the harder your suspension is, the more it can absorb the energy and then release it, bang, and throw it back out in a new direction to accelerate you along again. So that's stiffness, and that's why you would want it. You want it for things like sprinting. A sprinter wants to be really, really on the stiff side. Like, if stiffness is 10, extremely stiff, they want to be 8, 9. They want to be very stiff because they want to be able to just fly along the ground, right, with barely touching it, and not slowing down at all anytime. If their feet hits the ground, they want to be getting faster, not slowing down, then getting faster. Field sport, you want to be a little bit more compressive because you do need to be able to stop more than a sprinter does. A sprinter can take as long as they want to stop. Field sport, you're going to need to stop a little bit more. So you don't want to be quite so stiff, but you still want to be pretty stiff because more of what you're doing is going to be change of direction. Not stopping dead, but going from running full ahead, in a straight line to having to go, say, to the left. You're going to have to turn really hard and really quick, and you don't want to have to slow down when you do it or do a big loop. You want to bang and fire again. Absorb the energy into your tendons and then release it and help your muscles to fire along. So that's why you would want to be stiff. It makes you able to run quickly and more efficiently without losing, the energy, right? Why compressive? Compressiveness is useful in something like, gymnastics is a good one because, they have to be very flexible. And flexibility and compressiveness are linked in one together. They are able to generate that force over a long duration of their muscle, and they don't need to necessarily maintain this forward momentum and they don't want to be losing energy. They don't have to be quite so efficient with how their muscles are generating speed, right? All they need to be able to generate energy from very odd positions. And so they want to be very compressive. They also want to be able to land well, boom, sink into it and stop dead. So they want to be compressive. Same with a netball player. Really simple examples, netball player, they want to be able to stop dead. So they want to be a bit more on the compressive side where they can just bang, sink their hips, stop dead, right? So that's why you want to be compressive. Now, there are injuries that come from being either too stiff or too compressive. And especially if you're being too stiff or too compressive doing the opposite kind of thing. i.e. you're very stiff doing something like netball. If you're a sprinter and then go to play netball, you won't be great at it. And if you're really trying to play netball hard, you'll probably hurt yourself, quite frankly, because you're built to keep going, not to stop, right? So if I'm a sprinter, I've got stiffness, then when I try and stop, my body naturally puts all the energy through into my tendons, which your tendons, again, they're hard springs, they can only go so far. And if you're trying to get them to boom, do it this, compress and then dissipate the energy to stop, that's when you can get issues because they're not good at dissipating the energy. They're good at storing it and then reusing it like a rubber band. They go and throw you off in another direction, right? They're good at that and that won't injure them. But stopping dead, they're not good at that. And they're not big enough to absorb that energy, right? They just don't have the size. Whereas your muscles, if it goes through your hamstring, your calves and all this thing, they do have that size and that ability to absorb that energy and stop it. So, stiffness and common injuries that happen are tendon and ligament injuries. Small injuries to smaller muscles, smaller parts, more soft tissue, right? And often happen from trying to stop too quickly. Injuries from compression, again, because you're going through the bigger muscles, your big muscles, they tend to happen, like things like hamstring tears, or even just pulling your hamstring, or calf tears, things like that. That tends to be where you get a lot of injuries from overcompressiveness. That tends to happen in sports like rugby, when a player is too compressive, when they try and change direction. Because again, what you're trying to tell your muscle to do is absorb this energy and redirect me that way. Basically, your muscle's not built to do that. Again, that's the trouble. What we're discussing is what the tendon and the ligaments absorb the energy and boom, spring it off. You're trying to get your muscle to do that. It's trying to go two ways at once and it can't cope. And it goes nuts and rips, right? So that's what can happen there. If you try and keep the momentum going, keep the speed going, do a side step, that can be where if you're overly compressive, the muscle goes, I can't do that. That's not my ability. That's not my role. So if you're overly compressive, that's where, hamstring tears and calf tears and things can come in, especially in a sport like rugby. Okay? And that's the main thing in terms of what stiffness and compressiveness are. You've got a pretty good understanding from that of what they are, why you care, why they're useful in whatever sport you're doing, and injuries that if you're too much of one way or too much of the other way, depending on the sport, because they'll have a different optimal level, what can happen and what can involve. So that's going to be it for the video today about stiffness versus compression. What I am going to do immediately after this, I am going to put up a video on how to improve your stiffness for sprinting and for agility. So go have a watch of that if you're interested in getting some exercises that are usually done as a warm-up to help you improve there. So as always, guys, if you have any questions, if you think I've said anything wrong, hit me up in the comments, ask me a question. I am more than happy to have a chat, more than happy to learn more things too, if I have got something wrong. So hopefully that video was helpful to you. Hopefully it made you understand a bit of how the body works. And again, in future videos, what I'm going to do, I'm going to talk a bit more about how stretching and flexibility and all that kind of stuff, and where that is actually worth doing, where it's good and where it's not as useful. You shouldn't say good and bad, where it's useful and where it's not as useful, because there are a few misconceptions about that, like I said in my previous video, but we're going to clarify what I was talking about there just a little bit. So that'll be a video further along down the track. Anyway, guys, have a good day, and I'll see you around. See ya, team.